la comunidad del plan de rescate. Quiero que estén todos bienvenidos para explicarle que esta noche va a haber interpretación en español. Ustedes van a ver en su pantalla, en el lado derecho, una pequeña globo o un cuadro donde ustedes pueden seleccionar qué lengua quieren en español. Y si tienen algún problema o alguna pregunta, por favor, déjenos saber.
Great. So tonight we have a few speakers opening the night. We'll have a presentation on the American Rescue Plan and what that means for Providence. And then we'll open into an open comment period where you all are the star of the show and you get to tell us what you would like to see as part of the Providence Rescue Plan. So that's a brief overview of the run of our show tonight. I will stop and let the interpreter interpret, and I will continue with an overview of the Providence Rescue Plan website, which just launched this week. Oh, the channels are turned on. Okay, thank you, thank you. Great, so that should already be going. Let's start with the presentation of the Providence Rescue Plan website. We've been working hard to get this all to you. We want this to be as accessible to the public as possible, and we're working hard on that and welcome any and all feedback. So let me share my screen. So this is the Providence Rescue Plan website. You can see the URL is pvdrescueplan.com. We also have that domain in Spanish. It's pvdplanderescate.com, and we will share that in the chat. So I'm going to give a brief overview, but I encourage you to really look at this page, spend some time with it, and become familiar with ways you can get involved. So what we'd love for you all to do, our number one ask, is to take the survey. This is the best way to get your voice into this process. So right here at the top and in multiple places throughout the site, you'll be prompted to take the survey. So I will go there now. It's just loading. There we go. So here you can share thoughts. Well, tell us who you are, share how COVID has impacted your life and your neighborhood, and how you think the Providence Rescue Plan money should be spent. We really are paying attention to each response. So please let us know and share this survey far and wide with people in your community, with your neighbors, with organizations that you're involved with. There's a part here where you can share longer thoughts, so feel free to really share. Okay, I'll speed this up a bit. That's the survey. We also have a task force, which you'll hear more about, so I won't get too into it, but you can find out more about the COVID-19 Recovery and Resiliency Task Force that is leading this process that you're a part of tonight. And again, this is pvdrescueplan.com. And finally, if you go to the About page, you can learn about what the process has been so far. You can see a public ordinance that outlines funding that has already been allocated. And again, you'll hear more about that soon. And you can also learn about the connection between this and the Federal Rescue Plan. Oh, and of course, if you go to the Get Involved page, you can see our community event calendar. And this is the best way to stay informed on every public meeting that we have as part of this process.
All right, Lely, I'm in the conference here, so leave me alone.
Okay, so you'll hear more about the different pieces, but we really wanted to walk folks through the website because there were a lot of questions last night about it. So if you have any questions, again, feel free to throw them in the chat. And I'm going to pass this over to Marcela. Hi, Marcela.
Hi, Jackson. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here. So I work for the Latino Policy Institute. We are based within Roger Williams University. And our focus is that through research, education, and advocacy, we work to inform public policy about Latinos and how to improve our social and economic and education growth in life. And so it's a pleasure to be here for this really, really important conversation. So today we are here to learn about and discuss our priorities as a community for the Providence Rescue Plan, which is the allocation of Providence's portion of federal American Rescue Plan funding. And we're partnering here at the Latino Policy Institute with the city of Providence to reach communities that were hardest hit by COVID and that continue to be hard hit by COVID. So once again, we'll put it in the chat. Don't forget to take the community engagement survey that Jax mentioned earlier. It's really important that we can get your voice in this process. So thank you again. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Jorge Lorza today to give us a few remarks. Hi, Mayor.
Hey, Marcela. Thank you. Thank you, Marcela, for partnering with us. We appreciate the work that the Latino Policy Institute is doing. So I'm just here because I want to thank everybody for participating. We really have a once in a lifetime opportunity to invest up to $165 million. And we want to make sure that we have the voices of the community and that we have them heard as part of this process. So thank you for being involved, and thank you for helping us invest in our collective city, which means a stronger present and a much stronger future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mayor. And now I want to introduce the co-chair of the City of Providence's COVID-19 Recovery and Resiliency Task Force member, Oscar Mejias. Oscar, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Marcela and Latino Policy Institute for help us to organize this community conversation. My name is Oscar Mejias, and I am the co-chair of the City of Providence COVID-19 Recovery and Resilience Task Force. This is a group that was created in order to collect information and to prepare a report with recommendations in how to invest the funding that is coming with the American Rescue Plan Act, and the City of Providence will receive. And we will present a series of recommendations in order to make that this fund have an efficient and effective impact in our community. As the mayor just said, we are looking for have a right use of the fund in order to have a better future for our city. So the task force has public meetings every Friday at 12 p.m. at the City Hall, and is open to the public, so the public could do some comments. And we are taking in account every opinion. We want to hear from everybody, what they have to say and what the people think, what are the top priorities in the use of this funding, these dollars that we want to do the best use for our community. So we invite you to attend our meeting on Friday. But also for those people who are not able to attend those meetings, we are opening a special spaces like this community conversation. We had one the last Tuesday, this one, and also for the business, we are preparing 2 roundtables where we want to open the space because we want to hear all the people who has been affected by the COVID-19. It's important to highlight that we respect, and everybody in this meeting should respect the opinions and the intervention of the other people. So because everybody has the right to express their opinion. So because we have a short time, we want to hear from you, but we need that you have in consideration that your exposition need to be precise and short, because we want that everybody has the opportunity to participate. Once again, this is a huge opportunity and one lifetime opportunity to hear from you, our community, your think, your opinion, your comment about the top priorities of our city. Everything into the framework of the COVID-19 impact in our community. So to start today, I want to introduce our first speaker, which is Julian Driggs. Julian, please.
Thank you so much, Oscar, and thank you to the Latino Policy Institute for hosting this, this community session. I'm very grateful and honored to be here. Very brief introduction. First and foremost, I am a Providence resident in Washington Park. I work during the day at the Rhode Island Department of Health. It is in the Health Equity Institute. I've been working on COVID for the past year and a half as the coordinated response lead, coordinating COVID response in Pawtucket and Central Falls, two of the hardest hit communities alongside Providence. And I just want to say that I'm not here representing my employer or the state. I am here as a community resident and a member of the task force, and really here to listen and respond to the communities hardest hit by COVID, who are impacted by every other system of oppression as well, and looking for the transformative changes that we know we need, not just to respond to COVID, but to create a better world and a better community for all of us. So thank you. It's really great to be here.
Thank you, Julian. Julian is an active member in our task force. We appreciate his collaboration. I have the opportunity also to present and to introduce another active member in our group, who is the Councilwoman Nirvan Lafortune. So I welcome you and pass to you the voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. And thank you, Marcella, for facilitating, hosting us virtually in this virtual space, and also helping to facilitate this conversation. So when I introduced the resolution to create the task force, it was because I wanted to make sure that these federal funds that are coming into our city were distributed equitably. And for us to think about how we can ensure that many of our marginalized communities are communities that were impacted quite significantly from COVID, were able to get the necessary resources and sustainable and to create sustainable initiatives to move forward. And so what we hope comes from this conversation is input from the community. We've been meeting regularly on Fridays, and part of the meeting is for us to hear from different community-based organizations where they're presenting the work that they're doing. So we have an idea of the different entities or community service type entities within the city of Providence. But at the end of the day, these are public federal dollars, and we want to make sure that whatever recommendations we outline, those are recommendations are informed by your input and by the needs primarily of the community. So I thank all of you who are here today. And I know that we might not get to everyone, so please fill out the survey if you are not, if you don't have a chance to talk. And I know sometimes too, just being in like an open space, sometimes people don't want to speak publicly, but again, use the survey. Come to the public meeting so you can hear about the various organizations and be a part of that conversation. You can also access it via Zoom, and also just make sure that you're also reaching out to people within your different groups within your community so they know, and you're sharing the survey with them as well, because we want as much public participation as possible. And I also want to thank Oscar and Angie and Koma Bannerman, who are the co-chairs of this committee and have just been doing an exceptional job, and also Mayor Alorza and his team for really prioritizing this, and also the consultants who are doing an amazing work bringing us all together. So thank you, everyone. And you and all of you for participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Lafortune. Yeah, definitely we want to extend our appreciation to all the team who has been working with the task force, and of course, to the people who is present in this meeting. So I want to give the word to Marcela, please.
Thank you so much, Oscar. And now I'm going to shift it to Diana Perdomo, who's going to give us a brief overview of the rescue plan. Diana.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I am going to share my screen for a moment and give you all a brief presentation on the American Rescue Plan. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Okay. Can everyone see the screen all right? Okay, so as many would know that in March of this year, President Biden actually signed off on the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. This was a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill that was intended to speed up the United States recovery from the economic and health effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing recession. Now, what that means is that every state, every municipality, counties are all receiving federal resources to be able to allocate them to the needs that are most prevalent within their communities. This federal funding is broken up into 3 general tranches. The first is CRF-style state and local funds. That means corona relief funds. And this is similar in the way that prior stimulus funding packages have been coming to the state. That is estimated at about $1 billion for the state, plus another $100 million for COVID capital projects. But what's really interesting about this CRF style state and local funds is that it actually holds about $540 million for local cities and towns in the state of Rhode Island. So Providence being one of those places. There are also direct awards to agencies for dedicated purposes. So I'll mention briefly later about Rhode Island Department of Education's allocation and how that will come to the Providence Public School District. But there are other agency-specific funds relative to housing and other areas. There's also direct assistance to individuals and businesses. Many of you may know that we had continued stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment benefits, tax credits, the child care tax credit for one, and more for individuals and families. There were also programs associated with the PPP loans, restaurant relief, and more for businesses. Now, what does this mean for Rhode Island? So as I mentioned earlier, one of those tranches of funding being the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, which flows about, in general for the federal government total, about $130.2 billion, translates into about $540 million coming to Rhode Island. And the purpose of that $540 million is for those flexible funds to be used as relief and revenue replacement available for use for costs incurred through December 31st of 2024. And these funds are coming directly to municipalities, so cities like Providence. I'm going to go over briefly Providence allocation of that total. So as the mayor mentioned, we have about $165 million that is coming to the city of Providence. It's coming in 2 specific tranches. So the first being that there's a direct federal allocation of about $131 million, of which the city of Providence has already received 1/2 of that, and will be receiving the other half at a later date. There's also a county level allocation via the state. So the federal government gave this to the state to then distribute to counties. But because we don't have an organized government structure around a county, these are actually coming down directly to cities. So this is being broken up by the size of each city and being allocated appropriately that way. And we just submitted our application to the state to receive those funds. And we're expecting a little under $35 million to be added to our total to get us to about $165 million. As I mentioned earlier, the Rhode Island Department of Education is also receiving a direct allocation. And what we're understanding of that is that the Providence Public School District will be receiving about $180 million in federal funding. That is allocated in very specific ways. So that's intended for 20% learning loss, about $31.30 million to go to learning loss. The remaining goes to local education associations for about $125.4 million. And there's an additional Consolidated Appropriations Act of $23.3 million. Now, the district has had a separate process about getting feedback in terms of how to allocate those funds, but we are coordinating with them as we use the City of Providence's resources and determine how to allocate those resources. Very briefly, eligible uses of funds. Federal government programs tend to have a lot of restrictions and regulations in terms of how you can use those dollars. This is a very broad overview of that. The federal government has actually put forward an interim final rule and reporting requirements that we are working with our consulting teams to comb through and make sure the City of Providence is doing this all right. The eligible uses of funds are to, one, respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency or its negative economic impacts. This includes the direct assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. There's a provision within this that allows for premium pay to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency. Also noted is government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue to the COVID-19 public health emergency. Just means how much the city lost and was able to recuperate or is not able to recuperate. And these funds allow for us to recuperate some of the lost revenues during the pandemic. And then, of course, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Two key things that we cannot do with the funding. One, we can't use the fund to provide any tax cuts. So no tax cuts, nor can we put funding into our pension contribution. But municipalities can be flexible with the resources. They can go to quasi-agencies, state agencies, to nonprofits, or back to the state if we think we can broaden a pool utilizing the state program. As I mentioned earlier, the U.S. Department of Treasury has a whole website on this information, and they're putting out all the rules, all the regulations, all the details regularly, and they update it all the time. One piece in particular is a fact sheet that's about 7-8 pages that goes a little further in detail about the American Rescue Plan and specifically the local recovery funds too. So I encourage everybody to check that out when you can, because it's really educational. Now, what's the process for determining the use of funds in Providence? Some of our speakers earlier mentioned a couple of things that are already in place. To start, through our budget process this year and in working with the City Council, the administration put forward an ordinance that addressed some immediate needs that the city had. And this is the first allocation of the American Rescue Plan. This allocation does not mean that these funds have been fully programmed yet. We still have to do some work to program some of these funds, but it means that we've been given the budget to go forward and create those programs. So for instance, some of these for summer programming, immediate needs for this current summer, we've already extended those uses to expand summer job programs, do night basketball, and expand summer recreational opportunities. We're in the process of RFP, creating requests for proposals around our anti-violence investments. And so you'll see those coming out soon, and people can apply to help us with those initiatives, particularly nonprofits or others who can provide this service will be invited to apply. And then we do have a couple of pools of funding that were designated specific agencies and for specific purposes. So things like the Roger Williams Park, Roger Williams Park Gateway, not Park Gateway, project is starting. And we also were allocating grants to libraries, so about $500,000 to Providence Community Library to expand hours and help support some of their infrastructure needs around COVID, and then also support to the Providence Public Library. They've been doing a whole lot of work during COVID to help reach our communities. We're also creating an application process currently for our small business relief program, so small businesses can take advantage of that fund. And also grants to our community centers will also be through an application portal. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of the eligible criteria, There's a portion in which the city will want to recuperate revenues. And thus we've allocated a portion of the first tranche to ensure that the city is made whole through the importance of these resources, which we're intended to do that. Now, what are we doing going forward? As mentioned, we have a task force. Thank you, Oscar, for co-chairing it. Angie and Koma, wonderful co-chairs that are helping to lead this effort with us. And to Councilman LaFortune, who really shepherded this process forward and encouraged us to get to where we are. It is a diverse group of people throughout the city who are helping us determine how to use these funds. Meetings began in July, and they, as mentioned earlier, they're open to the public and they're all posted on our open meetings portal. And you can access it via our website that Jax mentioned earlier. So the COVID-19 Recovery and Resiliency Task Force has 4 key goals through this process. They are intending to, 1, listen to the needs of the city of Providence as presented by city departments and directors. The public can go ahead and access any of the meetings we've had and presentations presented to date. And we would encourage folks to do that through the website. Make sure you access those and see what's been shared, and that will continue. Second is to gather robust input from Providence communities, so residents, businesses, and others, and weighing in the interests of Providence community members. And finally, as Oscar mentioned earlier, provide recommendations on how to further allocate funding. We're also doing a host of public engagement. So this evening is an example of that. We also hosted a meeting on Tuesday with the NAACP. We are also having a couple further meetings coming up on Friday, September 10th at 5:30, hosted by Facilitate Change. More information will come out from that, and that will be updated on our website. Same for our September 22nd session, hosted by Arise. And as Oscar mentioned, we're planning 2 small business roundtables, one for small business and one for anchor businesses. And the survey, super important, as shared. We'll have as many people to take that survey as possible and provide us as much input as possible so that we can hear from all of you. As Jax mentioned, there's a great website. I encourage you all to please check it out. And hopefully you can provide us your input and help us in this process to determine how to use these funds. Thanks.
Thank you, Diana. So now for the next 50 minutes or so, we will move on to the open comment period. So how this portion will work is on your screen, if either you are on your phone, your computer, on Zoom, you may just raise your hand. There should be a button that allows you to raise your hand. When that happens, it will let you kind of come in and either share kind of your thoughts or questions. And so we ask for you to discuss and like share your needs and your wants for the rescue plans here in Providence. I also want to emphasize that this is a listening session, and it's great that we have some members of the task force here today, as well as city council members. And so this session is meant to inform the future spending and how the task force members we'll have some concrete information later on. And they might not have some concrete information right now or how they will spend the money, because that has not been decided yet. That's why this input is incredibly important. So with that, if you have any thoughts or questions that you'd like to share today, please let us know by raising your hand or putting it in the chat. I see one hand for Victor Regino.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me here. I think this is like fantastic. It's definitely needed in the community, especially in the Latino community. I just had a question about when the timetable is of when this money has to get out.
I can take that question. So the American Rescue Plan actually allows for municipalities, at least the resources that Providence has. So we have to allocate it within 3 years, but spend it within 5. So we have a good timetable. In terms of the process we're undergoing with our task force, we're hoping to have first round of recommendations sometimes towards the end of October. So those are the 2 timelines we're looking at.
Thank you, Diana. I have Miguel Sanchez.
Hi, thank you, everyone at the Latino Policy Institute and all the task members for sharing this time to educate us and answer our questions. My only question right now, so I know the City Council, along with the Mayor's Office, allocated the 42 million. So does that mean we have around like 120 million available now, or how much does the city have currently at the moment available to spend?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions or just ideas or thoughts, please feel free to share them with us today.
I think that it's important, Marcela, to reinforce the message to the people who is attending this meeting that your input is needed by this task force. We don't want to present a report with recommendation just based in the presentation that some groups or the group that we are inviting to the public meeting present. We want to hear the community. We want to hear your opinion. Even your ideas could be very helpful for this task force. We need to be aware that this is a one lifetime opportunity to have resource and to allocate it in direct benefit to our community. So please feel free to have your opinions. If you don't want to talk, write it in the chat or even send it as a message or use the way that you feel more comfortable to share your opinion. But I want to reinforce the message. Your opinion is so important. So please.
Absolutely, thank you. And it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So absolutely just share, your thoughts and ideas are really important. I have Miguel Sanchez again.
Thank you. Where can someone see like what the restrictions are? My just simple question is, do the same restrictions that apply to like municipalities, would they apply to the state as well?
So it is my understanding that depending on the tranche, that there are different requirements. So we can speak to the requirements for the local historic or the local recovery funds, the state and local funds. The Treasury website, so if you go to U.S. Department of Treasury, or if you just Google U.S. Department of Treasury American Rescue Plan, it'll take you to a website that details all of this. And so you can see the full plan. You can go into the local plan and look at what's happening in municipalities. There are a number of documents there that are really helpful. There's the interim final rule that goes through all the details that the Treasury have put out, the guidance the Treasury have put out around this. And then additionally, there's a fact sheet that I think is super helpful. It's about 7-8 pages. It condenses all the information into one. And so if you're going to read anything, I would say that. And I know that there's also an FAQ page up on the Treasury website that they're constantly getting questions from cities and folks who are trying to program these dollars, and so they're regularly updating the FAQ. So go to the Treasury website because that's the best place, and we do link to this information on our website. So if you go to the Providence Rescue Plan website, you can also find the link there.
Thank you. Yes, and I just saw that Councilwoman LaFortune and the Providence Communications team actually put some of this information up there. So feel free to click through it. And like Oscar said, if you have ideas right now or later, remember this community survey as well. You have some time left to be able to do this. Tony has his hand raised.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for hosting this session, Marcela and LPI, and thank you to the city and task force members for providing the information and the opportunity for citizens to participate. I have lived in Providence for 50 years now, and I don't think the needs of the city have changed very much in 50 years. The COVID pandemic has certainly made things worse for many people and has brought to light the magnitude of the problems we face. But I want to suggest to the task force members that you focus on the most important needs that have always existed in Providence, and not spend too much money or too much time on what look like creative, innovative, new projects that don't really address those underlying needs. And those are very simple. The most important need in the city of Providence is to address the extreme poverty, which has always been at the core of the city's economic and social problems. The quality and the availability of housing that our residents can afford. More than 2/3 of the people who live in Providence are renters. The vast majority of them are renting from absentee landlords. The quality of housing in Providence is still and has always been a problem. Lead paint, lead poisoning is still a problem in our homes and parks and public spaces. The availability of affordable heat and utilities for people's housing is still a problem. Those issues need to be addressed. Our youth need more activities. Our recreation centers and our community centers need more support than they're getting right now. The public libraries, the Providence Community Library, as well as the Providence Public Library, need support so that they can be a safe and warm and cool place for our youth to study and to take advantage of resources that may not be available either in their schools or in their homes. So the area of youth recreation, youth activities, after-school activities, and education are still critical. Food and nutrition are still a problem, as they have always been. Our lowest income residents are still living in many places where quality, affordable food is hard to come by. Any projects or proposals that come to you that can address the food shortage and the availability of food problem, I hope you'll look kindly on those proposals. And finally, our elderly, which continue to be a large part of the city's population and increasingly needy, as they also are falling further, many of them further and further into poverty. Those who do not live in subsidized housing, but who live in private housing, still face rising rents, the difficulty of finding an affordable home that's appropriate to their physical needs, their medical needs, and so on. So I want to end with that. I know a lot of other people have things to say, but I just want to strongly encourage the task force and the city council members who are here to address the core needs of the city of Providence, which are no different now than they were before the pandemic, and use as much of this pandemic funding as possible to address those core needs, to prepare us for how we will prosper as a city and as a community after all of this pandemic funding is gone.
Exactly. So Tony, I just think, first of all, thank you for outlining some of like the pressing issues that have impacted the city for quite some time. And you're absolutely right. All the pandemic did was exacerbated the disparities that have existed forever. I grew up in Providence. Julian, lives in Washington Park. My parents have been in the same house in Washington Park for 30 years. And before that, we were on Dartmouth Avenue. And so one of the things before I introduced the resolution to create the task force, one of the things I did was put out a preliminary, just a preliminary survey out to the community. And some of the things that you mentioned were the issues that came up as pressing needs that included affordable housing, workforce housing, putting people back to work, so employment for adults, youth, mental behavioral health, access to that, supporting our businesses, and also talking with folks, food insecurity, and services for our youth. So again, the goal of this is not of having these, creating the task force and also holding these sessions, is to hear from the community so that the recommendations that we outline are informed by the community needs. So, and also the recommendations, and we've talked about this as a committee, is thinking about sustainability as well. So it's not just like this offshoot thing, but how can we build upon work that's already being done within the community that addresses some of these needs? But the community is going to inform that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I think, thank you, Tony, for bringing that up. I think that's a really important thing. It's, you listed core issues that impact our city and cities around us. And so that is exactly what we're hoping that some of these funds can address. And that's why, as Oscar was mentioning, as I mentioned, like, this is an opportunity to be brave and like dive deep into like what are the things that we should be doing with this funding to really impact this, not just as a program for the time being, but that can have long lasting impact. So that's hopefully what we'll, have. And so I have Miguel and Paula. So Miguel, let's go with you first.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Tony, thank you so much for bringing up all those very important issues. You reminded me when you said the housing crisis. I saw an article on the Boston Globe, I'm not sure it was like last week or 2 weeks ago, about a nonprofit starting in Boston, I believe it is, that is gonna pretty much like dedicate its work to finding low income housing to people that have like Section 8 vouchers. So I think like that's a great idea. I work in constituent services for the governor, and that's something that we get a lot is people that have a Section 8 voucher that unfortunately can't use it or are unable to use it because they aren't able to find housing. So while we're getting the money to people to use for housing, they're having a difficult time finding a place. So I think if there was like a nonprofit or a program that dedicated to finding housing for those people that have the assistance already, I think would be very useful.
Thank you, Miguel. Does anyone in the task force have anything they'd like to share or add to that, or anybody in the council? Great. Thank you for sharing that, Miguel. Paula Hudson.
Yeah, I would like to agree and applaud Tony for bringing up all those issues that are very important. I would also like the task force to be aware and have a focus on those in our community who are currently without any shelter, who are living on the streets, who are literally sleeping in abandoned cars. And with winter coming, I know I'm the executive director of a social service agency called Better Lives Rhode Island. We operate a food pantry. We serve 5,000 individuals a month out of our food pantry. We serve 160 people, individuals a week with our takeout service that we now have. We used to have a meal site. And we also provide intensive holistic case management to those who are without housing. And so I know firsthand the difficulties that are being faced. And I also know firsthand that in line with what Miguel said about the unable to find housing, even with the Section 8, that is so true. And being able to find housing for those who have no income is impossible. So we need more shelters, we need more long-term planning, we need more infill throughout the city. I would like for the city to look at abandoned buildings and perhaps allow some of our agencies to rehab those and provide affordable housing to those who are currently homeless and on the street. And anyway, that's all I'm going to say, but thank you very much for your time. Thank you for hosting. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Paula, for your service and for the work that you do and for your ideas. I appreciated you getting very specific regarding that. Thank you so much. Tony, I think you have your hand raised again.
Yeah, thank you, Marcella. I appreciate the appreciation several of you expressed. I want to raise one other point having to do with implementation of whatever projects you determine. It's sometimes seductive and attractive and tempting to do something brand new. to award money to a brand new agency or to a group of people who have an innovative concept. I'm not sure we can do that now. I want to encourage the task force to think around existing community agencies, even organizations like the Providence Housing Authority, as a way to get housing built quickly, to get shelters, availability of shelters quickly, and so on. The Housing Authority has done infill housing. Same for Rhode Island Housing Mortgage Finance Corporation. They have funded third parties to build housing for many years, affordable housing. Now, I know if we just talk about housing, neither the Providence Housing Authority nor Rhode Island Housing have perfect track records of building housing quickly and affordably. But I suspect that in the crisis that we confront right now, you're better off going with agencies, nonprofit agencies, as well as government agencies that at least have the experience and have the names and contacts and have the ability to manage contracts. This is not a time for on-the-job training. So I would just want to leave it at that. I want to encourage the task force, when you think about where to allocate money, to think about the implementation benefits of going with existing organizations that have a track record and can ramp up very quickly, and not be tempted into using this money to start a lot of new organizations or to satisfy a lot of creative, innovative ideas. If this city can recover from this pandemic and can reestablish a productive workforce and can reestablish an adequate tax base, there will be money for those innovative projects going forward. But if we don't survive this pandemic and the economic and social crisis that it's created, all the innovative projects in the world will not make Providence the kind of city where we want to live.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, go ahead, Oscar.
Before give the word to Paula, thank you for all your comments, and your input is very needed in our side. Even when our role, we don't have authority to assign the funding. Our role is recommendation and prepare a plan. We are listening everybody, and we are trying to have a whole picture of the situation in Providence, not thinking in a specific need, but all needs that has been highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a very diverse group, the task force. There are several council members, there are several organizations, people with experience in different areas. So we are trying to have a clear picture about all those needs that Tony, Paula, and Miguel has been mentioning. So again, our role is to create the recommendation, create the report, but we will try to do our best to cover all those needs and to be concentrated in a real and effective recovery process. It's not just to cover immediate needs, but we need to think in the near future. So it's what we are trying to do in the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. And I just wanted to give an opportunity to either Julian or Councilwoman LaFortune to add anything if you have anything to add.
And I'll just echo what Oscar said, and also just add that there's sustainability is key, and also not recreating the wheel, and being thoughtful, because at the end of the day, it's a significant amount of money. But if you think about the cost of things, particularly housing, I mean, there's a shortage of housing. Part of the issue is the stock is low, and the stock is even lower when it comes to affordable housing. And, folks are struggling even with vouchers to get housing because there's just not enough. And so what we are also looking at is what are, again, some of the work that's being already done in the community, and how can we invest in it so that work can go on. Because what I would hate to see, and I'll speak from my own perspective, and based on what I've heard from various community members, is to allocate funds somewhere, and once the funding ends, then the whole project is dead. And that's something that we see happen often here. So sustainability is going to be key in this. and truly making some real investment to address some of the needs of our city, but also allow agencies that have been already doing the work and have struggled to do the work, the resources to really expand their reach.
Thank you. Paula?
Thank you. I just want to clarify, my comments were not meant to suggest that we create anything new or innovative. We have a lot of nonprofit agencies in Providence that have experience in creating housing. So my suggestion was merely to say if they could partner with other development people or possibly private developers to create new housing or create housing out of existing housing. That was, I just wanted to make the point that those who are without shelter are not overlooked in all of the deliberations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Paula, just to add, I also don't want to, I don't think we should discourage anyone from also bringing up an idea that might be new, because maybe that's an area that there is a significant gap and that can address, help address the need. But sustainability is something that we also should think about and should be at the core of any decision that's made.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Agencies like House of Hope, Crossroads have a good track record in developing and maintaining Amos House, in developing and maintaining housing.
Thank you. I have Miguel Sanchez again.
I'm sorry for taking up so much space in this conversation, everyone. This will be the last thing I have to suggest. But something that came to mind, hearing y'all speak about the housing, I think it's worth a shot. I don't think I'm not confident that it would happen because of the developer. But I think it's worth our time to start exploring maybe something with the state and the owners of the Superman building in regards to like a homeless shelter or something along the lines. I know they're developing new plans. That's just a thought.
Thank you, Miguel, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. No need to hold yourself back. And I have Julian next.
Thank you so much to everyone for all of these comments. Can you hear me? Good, okay. Following up on the housing pieces, I mean, this comes up over and over again. It is such a huge need and such a critical need. And I do know that from my work around COVID, I would say probably that there's many factors that led to who was most impacted by COVID, but probably the two biggest ones, if I had to pick two, were housing and immigration status. We saw really, really dramatic impacts in our immigrant communities and our refugee communities as well, people who are undocumented. And then the way that intersected with housing, not just affordable housing or who didn't have housing, but also just the crowding that we have in housing, the quality of housing, the housing conditions that people are in. So it's really clear that there's really major needs there. I'm grateful, and the eviction moratorium is so important, and I'm glad that it got extended again, but it will run out at some point. And so we know that these crises were a crisis before COVID, and COVID just made it that much worse. The other thing is it's not just resources, it's policies. And so looking for, in addition, how can these resources be used to support some of the policies we need to have in place? I know, Tony, you mentioned the absentee landlords being a consistent issue. So that's a huge one, things like rent control, in addition to building out more housing, more affordable housing, things like that. And then also thinking towards the future and the sustainability of this, just questions for the group around everything we've learned from COVID and how we can use that to prepare for the crisis of climate change that is already here and we know will continue to get worse and will continue to affect communities of color, working class communities, immigrant communities especially. And as that happens and how that's going to make our housing quality issues worse, the schools, the rec centers, the major issues around heat, around flooding, around people's working conditions, and how that will affect our immigrant communities more as well. So really looking for suggestions and ideas to address these longstanding issues, not just putting more money towards it, but using that money in really smart ways and effective ways. Tony, like you were saying, in terms of the things that are absolutely the most necessary and have been necessary for a very long time. So thank you all for your input on that, and I look forward to hearing more.
Thank you so much. And I have Doris de los Santos.
Yes, good afternoon, Marcela, and thank you for hosting tonight's conversation. Thank you to the Latino Policy Institute for creating this avenue and this outlet, along with the task force that is guiding this process. As I understand, the additional funding available for specifically targeting schools and education attainment and achievement. But I will be remiss if I don't use this opportunity to highlight the need for new school construction and stop the Band-Aid approach that we have been implementing in the city over the years. So my hope is that we build the schools that our students need to be able to enter the workforce or their career of their choice or college, and that we are building structures that are lending themselves for that, to provide that environment. I also have to underscore and also highlight something that my fellow colleague and friend Tony mentioned about addressing poverty. It's like in Providence, we have really to go back to basics and lift the families that have been left behind.
Might have lost Doris. Doris, can you hear us? Might have lost Doris. Okay, we might get her back and then we can bring her back. Oh, yep, I think she might have lost her.
It's better
Oh,
now?
yeah, perfect. Yes, we can hear you. Yes, you're good.
I'm not sure where, at which point, but I was, I was making the point for new school construction that is key, and stop patching and putting Band-Aids over buildings that are falling apart and that are not lending themselves for the environment that our students need. I was also emphasizing the need in Providence for going back to basics in addressing the poverty and the lack of opportunities of families that we have left behind for so many years, highlighting the fact that we should use data that have been collected over the last year or so. And as Mr. Drex was saying, the data is there that shows the pockets in some neighborhoods larger than others of families and individuals that have been affected by the pandemic, and how if we are really serious about going back, but going back better and reopening and rebuilding, we should be also making sure that these funds are made accessible to these families. Housing is a critical issue, and the housing solution needs to be bifurcated, tackling this from the homeowners that are trapped into their own homes because they don't, and some homes falling apart because they don't have access to capital to fix their homes. We have in the city a home repair program that is totally underfunded, and that's the only avenue that many families have. A long waiting list, because it's a policy decision. It's speaking about policies that needs to be looked to making sure that the policies that we have in the city are to better serve and to lift people up from poverty. We have to have a real solution to address the many buildings that are still boarded up across the city for many different reasons. Some of them are very cumbersome and attached to core proceeding and lending institutions. But it's related to the fact that we have almost a free-for-all absentee landlord policy approach in the city, and my hope is that all those issues are addressed. I'm dreadful that what we just saw in Central Falls with respect to lead poisoning, because kids are spending more time in their homes nowadays because of the pandemic, that it's just a matter of time that we may see a spike on lead poisoning numbers increasing, and all that is related to the condition of the housing stock. All that to say that my hope, again, is that we look at the people that have been mostly affected by the pandemic, that these funds are coming and being allocated to the city because of the impact of the pandemic, and that is only right and fair that we take an approach to an extent of going to basics and addressing the poverty and the lack of opportunities that our families in disadvantaged position have been facing. Again, thank you, Marcela, and thank you to the task force, and I continue looking for these opportunities.
Thank you so much, Doris, and thank you for elevating that again. I think you bring in a really important and beautiful point of housing, and I think it's been mentioned before. It's an issue that it's really the base of so many things, right? So, Tony and Paula mentioned, like, people who are unhoused and poverty, access to food, and this is just a big base. So I think it's really important. That's why this is such an important opportunity of investing and for the long term and creating new solutions. So thank you for that.
Marcela. Oh, you were on mute.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say just to just say one thing in terms of Doris's point. So there are different categories that are outlined within the American Rescue Plan Act, and one category is for capital improvement, where the American Rescue Act plan provides, I think, about $10 billion for capital improvement. And so one of the things that we should also think about is the different types of funding from that overall act that's going to come into the states and municipalities. The education department also received separate funding, and their plan actually was recently approved by the Department of Education, I think in July. It was approved. So as we're thinking about these things, also think about ways that we can partner with our state offices to address some of these issues, because the state is getting funding. So the state would be thinking about, if we want to use housing as an example, housing across the state of Rhode Island, and how can, like, the city of Providence with some additional funding, supplement that. And then in terms of education, what are some things that we can do in education with the funding from Providence, but also in collaboration with some funding from the state or RIDE. So I just want to also, make sure people are aware that there are different, sources of funding that have come in, and the summary page from the Treasury's office outlines all of them.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I just wanted to highlight, we have Facebook comments because we're also live on Facebook. So the first one is, I'm tuning in late to the meeting, but if we missed the bulk of tonight's meeting, how else can we participate? So one, Facebook will be recorded and you can see it at any point. We also will have other meetings like this, community meetings by other organizations, community organizations in the coming weeks. And maybe we can have Diana put up the calendar towards the end, if that's okay. And additionally, we'll put it also on the comment section in Facebook. You'll have an opportunity to share your thoughts through the survey. And please feel free to go into the website that we'll also put in the Facebook comments after this. Thank you. And then one more Facebook comment that I just want to have here in the record for Zoom. It's what about funding support for the AAG and reparations for BIPOC residents? It is time our community attempts to right the wrongs of our past and center the Black families and voices which were disproportionately impacted by COVID. Thank you. All right, I see one more hand up. Doris?
Yes, my apologies for bouncing back. But I got so into the conversation of housing that I totally forgot to also add into the list, of course, a critical area about job creation and investing in small businesses that are within our communities. And again, going back to looking at trends and data, the biggest impact when it comes to businesses has been on women-led owned business. And that was the largest loss of employment as well within the female cohort. And so again, if we are serious about investing in those areas that have been most affected, my hope is that the small business and the entrepreneurs that are in our community, and I'm not talking about the Chinese business that we are going to attract. I'm talking about the local businesses that are in our neighborhoods that are the backbone of our economy, also receive attention and support. Thank you, Marcela.
Of course, Doris, thank you. I have one more comment on Facebook. We should prioritize investing in BIPOC serving organizations like the My Van Leesons or Urban League. We need to prioritize serving our residents most in need. Thank you. And if you're on Facebook, keep putting your comments. And like I said, we'll put in the links for the survey as well in there. Do we have any more questions or ideas or thoughts? We've heard so much, in so many different issues. Some of what Tony actually mentioned was food access, and I'd love to hear if any of our residents here, our community members, have any thoughts or ideas on food access. Just one thing that was kind of floated by. Eliza?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Eliza.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I apologize for the background noise. I'm actually listening and driving. But I wanted to echo what folks have said about, expanding and building upon channels. And in terms of food access, really uplifted the impact of immigration. Talked about for a long time is expanding eligibility to SNAP benefits for people who are currently not eligible due to immigration status, which is something that, as other people have mentioned, might be a really interesting collaboration with the state level agencies, because SNAP is such a robust existing infrastructure. The implementation and the infrastructure could potentially already be in place if there was an additional funding source to extend those benefits to folks of all immigration statuses within the city. And the SNAP already has such a widely demonstrated impact in terms of immediate hunger relief and nutrition outcomes, that it's a tried and true and already kind of implemented strategy that with some additional funding could be potentially rolled out, and with real sustainability planning could be a really important long-term investment in food access across the community. So I wanted to put that into the conversation.
Thank you so much, Eliza, for bringing that up. We appreciate that. Any additional thoughts or questions that may have been marinating in your brain? Again, we have a few more minutes together today. But as as Oscar mentioned, and as Councilwoman Fortune mentioned, this is a really important opportunity. And we've heard really great ideas and thoughts. So just want to make space for a few more minutes.
Marcela, in the meantime, while we wait for other people to put in order the ideas and bring into this meeting, I just want to mention again that we are opening a roundtable, business roundtable. So we are inviting the business community, that Doris de los Santos just mentioned it, to be considered. We are considering very seriously to identify the main needs of our Latino business community. So, well, I'm sorry, all the business community, not just the Latino. But we want to invite you. So please follow the Facebook page of the Rhode Island Hispanic Chamber, the City of Providence, and other partners like Latino Policy Institute, where we will be sharing the information when and how will be those business roundtable. We are inviting different leaders in different industry and different area. So that will be other opportunities to give feedback or give us ideas, proposals, your opinion about how the funding could be assigned. So just to reinforce the invitation for the next opportunities to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Diana just actually shared her screen, so you can see the other opportunities coming up. So on Friday, September 10th, just a couple of weeks from now, we will have Facilitate Change hosted. And then on Wednesday, September 22nd, Arise will host it. And just to remind you all, these will all have different language access as well for those who need it. You still also have the rescue plan funding survey, which we welcome everyone to fill it out, and we'll put that on the chat again on Facebook and on Zoom. And again, the business roundtables that Oscar just mentioned. Thank you so much. And this has been a great hour and a half. We appreciate your thoughts, your passion, and the work that you do all in the city and for the city of Providence. And again, we please encourage you to complete the survey, and if you can, join us for other community conversations so that we can continue to bring really great ideas in the next few weeks. Thank you again, Oscar. Thank you, Councilwoman Fortune. Thank you, Julian. Appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Enjoy the beautiful day.
Thank you.